Lift the frame per manufacturer's recommendation. Always lift the trailer by the frame and never by its axle or suspension components, as they are not rated for the dead weight or point of contact loads that the trailer's frame is. Never go under the frame unless the frame is properly supported. To avoid injury, be sure to wear the proper protective equipment. Next, you will need to loosen and remove the lug nuts holding the tire in place. Save these as you will need them later. When using an impact to remove lug nuts, ensure the socket has come to a complete stop prior to moving on to the next lug nut, so as not to round off the corners of that lug nut. Once the lug nuts are removed, remove the tire from the hub assembly and place off to the side. Using a floor jack, lift the axle by the tie plate gently and support with a jack stand. To remove the shackles, you will need a wrench and impact. Place the wrench on the head of the bolts to prevent them from spinning and wallowing out the components. Then, loosen and remove the nuts. Once the nuts are free, you may remove the rear shackle and then slide the front shackle and bolts out. Grab your new AP kit and with your bolts in place, seat the new shackle to join the equalizer and spring axle.
If using new bolts, reapply grease on the shaft of the bolt itself. This would be an example of a standard shackle bolt, as you see in this video. Other options, like wet bolts, have a grease circ on the head of the bolt that would allow for grease application to be done after the bolt has been installed.
Next, place the shackle over the rear of the bolts and secure your nuts to the bolts by hand to help prevent cross-threading. Again, we will be grabbing an impact and our wrench and seating the wrench on the head of the bolt to prevent it from spinning as we tighten the bolts down with the impact. Once the nuts have been secured to the shoulder of the bolt, grab a torque wrench. Using our wrench to hold the bolt again, we will use the torque wrench to ensure that our bolts are tightened to spec. We will remove the bolt on the hanger just like we did with the shackles. We will again use a wrench to support the bolt and an impact to remove the nut. If the unit you are working on has correct track like the one in this video, note the position of the yellow cams prior to removal as they need to be oriented the same way when reinstalled. Once the bolt is removed, we will need to unseat it from the cam for a correct track system. To do this, place the head of the bolt into the socket and tap the threaded end with a mallet until it shifts free. Note, we only do this without protecting the threads because this bolt is being replaced. With our leaf spring hole lined up with our hanger, we can now install our new hanger bolt. Again, if the unit you are working on has correct track, ensure the cam is oriented the same as it was when you removed it, and place your bolt through the hanger. Place the rear cam on the back side of the hanger and secure everything in place by hand threading the nut to prevent cross-threading. Next, use the back side of your socket to protect the grease zerk if it is on your new bolt, and tap the new bolt splines into place with a mallet. Again, we will support the bolt head with our wrench and tighten everything down with our impact. Once the nut is firmly seated against the shoulder of the bolt, grab your torque wrench, support the bolt head with your wrench, and check that the bolt is torqued to spec. Repeat these steps for your remaining shackles and hangers as needed. Next, we need to once again gently lift the axle by the tie plate. Lift the axle and remove the supports, and then gently lower it back down. Roll your tire back into place. Line the holes up with the lug nut studs and remount your tire. Once the wheel has been remounted, grab your lug nuts from where you stored them and replace them all by hand. Continue to hand tighten the wheel lug nuts to help prevent cross-threading when you use your impact. Next, retighten your lug nuts following a star-shaped pattern to ensure that the tire is properly mounted. Just like when taking lug nuts off, ensure that the socket on your impact is not still spinning when trying to reinsert on the lug nuts, as this could round off the corners of the lug nuts. Next, you will once again want to lift the chassis up off the jack stands. Once the jack stands are free, remove them and lower the frame back down. With the tires back on the ground, grab a torque wrench and tighten each lug nut down to the recommended torque specs found in the service manual. Tighten your lug nuts in the same star pattern you used to tighten them down with your impact. Check and retorque your wheel lug nuts after 10, 25, and 50 miles, and check periodically during regular service.